I thought, no, I'm not a hippie. I'm a British rock musician. I was not into the hippie thing. I'm a drummer. I just want to be the drummer, wear cool British clothes and all that stuff. So when they were talking about, finding yourself, I thought I think I'm right here. I don't need to find myself.
Yeah. But, and also, one of the things that we kind of lost in all of that is one of the ways you find yourself is through doing your duty. You discover, okay, this is who I am. And maybe you need to step up. Maybe there are some changes that need to happen in your life because the person you discover is not that wonderful, innocent, pure person that you think you'll find. Maybe the person you find is a liar and a cheat and somebody who can't keep promises, and you need to change.
On the word of God, I will build my house.
Welcome to Grounded. I'm Steve Hartland, pastor at Cornerstone Community Church, right here in beautiful, amazing, wonderful, kind of warm today, downtown Joppa, Maryland. There's no town, by the way. That was a joke. And I have a guest with me on the podcast today. His name is Chris Wiley. Let me give you a little bit of bio on Chris so you know who he is. So besides writing for magazines and publishing books, and he's done quite a bit of both of those, he's a pastor. He's a pastor in the Pacific Northwest right now. And he has been a college professor, a commercial real estate investor. I think you're still doing that. I think I read that. A landlord, still doing that. A building contractor. He's been a lot of different things. Here's an important thing he's been married for over 30 years to his wife, happily married. They have 3 grown children, and I just heard a couple of grandchildren. Number 3, did you say on the way? Yes, right. Number 3 on the way. And let's see. I want to mention a couple of his books. Here are some recent ones that I think relate to our talk today. So he wrote one titled The Household and the War for the Cosmos. So it's about the household. Check that out. Get yourself a copy. And he's also written In the House of Tom Bombadil. Now, I tried to look at that one. I tried to do the look inside at Amazon, and I couldn't see enough, and I didn't have time to get it here. But I do remember Tom Bombadil. In fact, I remember the little jingle, Old Tom Bombadil was a merry fellow, right. Bright blue his jacket is, and his boots are yellow, right? I bet you know that one too, don't you?
Right.
Yeah, that one's kind of famous. So, Chris, welcome to Grounded. What else do you want to tell us that's biographical? Anything you want to fill in just so people kind of have an idea of who you are?
Okay. I was baptized Episcopalian. My folks, the old joke is whether high or low, the status is always quo with those guys. And, so that was the world of my childhood. My father was an academic. My mother was into the arts. And so we lived in kind of the vicinity of college campuses, which tend to be kind of bohemian. My father got involved in the Church of Scientology when I was a kid, so I saw that place from the inside, and it's as creepy as everybody has heard. And then I came after our family broke up, and I was a ward of the state for a while. When I was a teenager, I was living in Western Pennsylvania at the time, and I became a Christian through the influence of a little blue-collar church. I got a real love for blue-collar people and blue-collar culture. So I've got kind of a foot in 2 worlds. I kind of think of myself as a blue collar intellectual. That doesn't sound pretentious.
You know what? I have that same love for blue collar, and it's manifested itself in a bunch of ways. I think it's due to the fact that I was raised in a pretty rural, farmish part of Maryland, and all the kids I went to school with, they were probably farmers' kids, or most of them in the earlier years anyhow. But especially that when I turned 16, my dad announced to me, he didn't ask me, he just told me one day, "Oh, I got you a job. You're working this summer." "Oh, really? What am I doing?" And he got me a job working construction for a guy who builds houses.
Great.
And so I loved it.
Yeah,
it's like great. They're paying me to lift weights. It's physical work, and they're paying me for it. Right. So I always got construction jobs. Even part-time was during the school year after that. So so I got to love construction men and construction stuff. And then also in more recent years, just the time of day I've chosen to go to the gym. All the guys who are there are plumbers and electricians and all that kind of stuff. And I just love those guys. There's a realness about them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. I think when you're, someone who works with his hands, then you're in touch with the physical world, obviously, and you're awfully hard. It's awfully hard to kind of pull the wool over those guys. Yeah, fool those guys because a lot of academics, people are kind of caught up in the latest, I guess, intellectual fads. they don't really have kind of the day-to-day experience that keeps their feet on the ground, and they can get into stupid, goofy stuff.
Yes.
I love that world too. I lived in Cambridge, Massachusetts for about a decade, right between Harvard and MIT. And so that environment I'm comfortable in as well. But there's something about blue collar folks and the realism there that I just think is absolutely essential.
Yeah. Amen to that. It's wholesome. I love it. So, good. Thanks for giving us some biography. We're going to talk about the family from one angle and another. And why don't we start here? Let's talk about what we'll call the social importance of the family. So you know what I mean by that, right? Like, why is the family important to society? Why is it important to the world? Why is it important to the church? We all know it's in kind of bad shape these days, but talk about the social importance. What do you want to say about that?
Well, we're talking about creation, of course, when we are referring to the family in this light. And this is something that cultures around the world, both the cultures informed by the Christian faith and those that are pre-Christian, have noted, and that is that for a society to be healthy, the household and the family have to be strong. So we can go into the East and you can see what Confucius has to say about the institution. You can go into the classical world, antiquity, and see what people like Aristotle or Xenophon say about it. And then obviously what we see in Scripture with the house of Abraham and what we see in the house of David and all of the sort of the good and the bad. When things are going well, things are good. When things are not going well in the household, things are not good. And so it's the first institution, and it's fundamental. Now we live in a time where people think that the family may even be passé. And there are a lot of, strange notions floating around and have been floating around for the past couple hundred years that, we're dealing with. But in terms of the way people, throughout time around the world historically have thought about the household, it's like super important and for a healthy society.
Yeah, it's like, how can we not realize that anymore? Like it seems like we're feeling free to completely redefine the family any way we want it to be, and the family can be two males with a child or two women with a child or no dad or whatever, and these are all legitimate forms of the family, without thinking about what does that really do to a family? What does that do to children? How does that affect their training, their raising up, and so on? So maybe that could lead us to another question or a thing to talk about, and that is, so I guess we're all about the individual, not so much the family. We're about individualism. It's about the life of the individual. What's the individual want? This is why maybe it's more important that I get my divorce than what it does to my kids, right? It's because it's the individual. It's about me. So talk about, please, the family as a basic unit of humanity. Yeah. Maybe family also as having a federal head.
Yeah, well, I mean, when we think about institutions of any kind, groups of people who are working together, living together, you need to have an authority structure in order for that to occur, because there are going to be conflicts. There are going to be people who do things that are wrong. There are going to be people who are moving in different directions, and consequently, we need authorities to keep people working together and working in ways that are beneficial for everyone and all the parties involved. So when we think about a household or a family, it requires some kind of authoritative oversight for it to be healthy and productive. Now, just like any other kind of institution, you can have bad people in charge, and then they can take advantage of people and harm people and so forth. And there's a weird notion that seems to float around, particularly on the left, and that is, yes, we have to accept that we need authority figures in every other sphere of life, whether we're talking about employment or government or whatever. But in terms of the household, we don't need it, and that's just weird. And it's not actually even, I think, approached honestly. The people, so I've got a lot of, family who would be, I think, pleased to be called progressives. So I've seen the inner workings of their homes up close and personal.
In there.
Yes. Now I've been in, and then even in my own home, as a kid, that's kind of the way it was. And so what you end up in those situations is there is influence that is being exercised by parents, for example, but often dishonestly and in manipulative ways, because they can't just deal honestly with the fact that, okay, I am the head of this house, and I need to exercise authority for in the interest of everyone in the house. So they end up, with all these. Well, I won't go into all that stuff, but anyway. So in terms of the household, in terms of the head, that's absolutely essential. And then when we think about individualism, like any other ism, has an upside as well as a downside. Individuals are real. In other words, they're not. We don't like individuals are not socially constructed; they just are. Okay, you are you. I am me.
I'm one. Yep.
That's right. I've got children. They're individuals. I've got a wife. She's an individual. Individualism is the taking that reality to an absurd, sort of place. So if we think about individualism, what we're saying is that the individual is the only thing that's real, and everything else has to, in some sense, serve the individual, and not. We don't have any right to call individuals to serve others or serve their institutions or whatever. So, like when we think about the military, we praise men who are devoted to their duty. Right? They charge into the fray. They fight, risking their lives, and we praise them for that. Now, they weren't doing it for themselves. So, maybe there's a measure of self-regard in all of that when a person is trying to maybe just do his part, or maybe he wants to be a hero, but there's a larger cause that's served. And that larger cause is legitimate. And so the individual is not kind of the only thing to consider. And he may not even be the most important thing in the conversation. Another way to think about it is when we think of about a baseball team, every position has a role, and there are certain tasks that different players have, and so there is the individual serving in a particular capacity as pitcher, catcher, outfielder, whatever. But then there's the larger institution, which is the team. And the team, serving the team's interest is what the individuals do by trying to win as a team.
Yes.
So, and then you have an authority, in baseball, the manager, the assistant coaches, all of those people working together to direct the efforts of the team as the team is doing its thing. Now, some people are afraid that we'll lose individual distinctives, sort of things that make us unique as individuals if we think in these terms. But I think that's just absurd, because when we think about great baseball players, just to stay with that frame of reference, we think about them as being great in their role, but in their own way. So when we think about like Willie Mays was a great outfielder. There was no one else like Willie Mays. When we think about Willie Mays and his legacy, we think about Willie Mays. But the way we came to understand Willie Mays and his greatness was as he served in the capacity of as an outfielder, on a baseball team.
On a team, yes.
Yeah. So fathers, mothers, whatever, they're still themselves, and there are things that we as individuals bring to our roles. Pardon me. But that doesn't mean we're no longer individuals when we have roles.
To go back to your military metaphor for a minute. So like a lot of other people, I'm a little bit enamored by Navy SEALs. So, I've read some books and check out what they do. And of course, everybody knows this, that I'm sure it's not just in the SEALs either. It's across military. But one of the things, there are many things that might motivate you to charge, but one of them is I'm taking care of him.
Right.
I'm deeply committed to the guy over here and the guy over there. So same thing in the family, right? Why am I willing to deny myself and it hurts and I have to sacrifice and give? Well, it's because I'm committed to these people.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's a tremendously important thing to keep in mind. So I'm a product of the me generation. You may recall that period of time where
I think you and I must be about the same age. So yeah.
Right. So that's the 70s. And it's a kind of the wake of the chaos of the 60s. And you had all these people who were trying to find themselves. Do you remember that? Everyone was trying to find themselves. Yeah. But it just so happened that finding yourself entailed leaving all of the people you knew behind.
Whatever damage that did.
Right. Yeah. Yourself, where you were was somewhere in California, and you had to go to find yourself. It just so happens that all the people who depended on you were back in, Indiana.
Yeah.
And then you went. So that was really my folks. They each in their own way, kind of they were really out to find themselves. And
did that break up your family?
Oh yeah. Yeah. That was what led to it.
Yeah. I get it. Just by the way, somehow I never got caught up in that. Like I was a long-haired guy and people would call me a hippie, but I thought, no, I'm not a hippie. I'm a British rock musician. I was not into the hippie thing. I'm a drummer. I just want to be the drummer, wear cool British clothes and all that stuff. So when they were talking about, finding yourself, I thought like, I think I'm right here. I don't need to find myself.
Yeah. But, and also, one of the things that we kind of lost in all of that is one of the ways you find yourself is through doing your duty. You discover, this is who I am. And maybe you need to step up. Maybe there are some changes that need to happen in your life because the person you discover is not that wonderful, innocent, pure person that you think you'll find. Maybe the person you find is a liar and a cheat and somebody who can't keep promises, and you need to change.
That's really good. That's pretty powerful. So this is kind of related, I guess. We're hearing a lot about the patriarchy, the evil, the oppressive patriarchy. And I don't know if you've seen or maybe read. I have read. Somebody in the church said, "Oh, you got to read this. It's great." It was terrible. The book Jesus and John Wayne. Have you seen that one?
Well, I've seen it. I've not read it because I think I know everything that the author has to say. Yeah.
Except it's just astounding. Like she's a historian, right? A historian. And she claims that this all started with John Wayne.
Yeah. Well, she's goofy. She's up at Calvin, if I remember right. I can't remember her name. Yeah. Calvin's a place that I would not send anyone to go to school.
Yeah. Don't send your kids there, right?
No, this is the you've heard of endorsements. This is the disendorsement. And I'm a Calvinist,
John Calvin's rolling over in his grave.
He is. There's a lot of good. I had interactions with those folks at Calvin back in the day, back when I was doing urban ministry in the 90s, and they kind of gave me the heebie-jeebies then. But I guess, I've thought about writing a book entitled Jesus and Dirty Harry, because I think that Dirty Harry actually is a film that is suffused with Christian imagery. But the Christ that we see in Dirty Harry, this is not an endorsement of everything that goes on in the film. I mean, it's early 70s. It's gritty. There's gratuitous nudity. There's lots of violence, lots of profanity. This isn't family film night stuff. But it's pretty clear that John Milius, who wrote it, was portraying Harry as the avenging Christ. And you see all sorts of stuff in the film that indicate that. And what we have is Christ the judge. And this is the Christ that this gal doesn't seem to know anything about.
Pretty cool. Staying on the patriarchy. So, here we are talking about the family, the traditional family, if you will, the nuclear family, if you will. I'd prefer to just call it the biblical family, God's family. But we're talking about that family, and are we not then just perpetuating patriarchy? Or are you and I right now not just encouraging evil, oppressive patriarchy? Well, we both answer no, so why not?
Well, this gets us back to the earlier comments concerning institutions and authority. So there is no such thing as an institution without some authority structure and without someone given a task of overseeing it. whether you're talking about a boss at work or a mayor of a city or a father in his home. By the way, one of the things that a lot of folks could use a little help with is understanding the roots of words. So the word patriarch refers to a father who is a ruler.
Father rule, yes.
Father rule. And in the Greek, the word for family is patria, and that's where we get the term patriarch.
Yes.
And then patera. So the relationship between the father and a family in Greek is so integral that you cannot separate father rule from family. In other words, when you said family in Greek, and this is New Testament Koine Greek, you were saying father.
Yes.
And this, by the way, is when the Apostle Paul uses that wordplay. Yeah, where that wordplay says, from whom all the families of earth derive their name. Yes. He's stating that a father's role in the home is directly connected to the Father in heaven's creative work.
Yes.
So we can't abdicate. And that's what people want us to do. They want us to abdicate. And what we should do is endeavor to govern our households in the light of God's truth. And that's that means that we do govern justly, and that we are, motivated by love and so forth.
Yeah. Amen. So staying in Ephesians 3 for a minute. So that text you referred to, I believe it's verse 21. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
So, where Paul says, he's the great Father from whom every fatherhood on earth is named, mm-hmm. and the use of the Greek word there that you referred to. So if somebody is seeking to overthrow patriarchy, would it be fair to say they might not know this, but they're really trying to overthrow God's government?
Yeah, I think so, because we're talking about creation. And this gets us back to some things that we, kind of alluded to briefly. We are in a war with nature, and particularly the West. And that war with nature has to do with things like, procreation, has to do with our understanding of ourselves as male and female.
Yes, gender.
Right. And so that war is a war against God taken to the level of creation. So we've seen over the last couple of hundred years a very concerted effort to get the church out of things, to truncate its work and role in social life. Now we see this war on the Christian faith being taken to the next level, in which creation itself is the field of conflict.
Well said. So why do we need patriarchy? Why do we need father rule? And as you said, obviously it ought to be a beneficent rule. It ought to be a principled rule. It ought to be a godly and a wise rule. It's a rule for the benefit of the ruled, and so the whole family can be on the mission. I'm leading us on this mission that God has given us. So it's all of that. But why do we really need patriarchy, or why do we need fathers? Why does a household need a father? Maybe even answer a father and a mother. Why?
Oh, yeah. Well, of course, it takes two to tango, as they say. And well, there are a couple of things to think about. One is the work of fathers as it relates to life in our world, and that's one subject that we've already been talking about. There is, if we think of, say, and this is, I think, an important component to what has occurred in terms of seeing the household go from the center to the periphery. Traditionally, households were productive enterprises. In other words, they weren't just simply places that people hung out at the end of the day and ate, Doritos and watched Netflix. Yeah, they were places where people were engaged in the work of daily life. They were making a living, and the word economy, which we now apply almost exclusively to the market, actually refers to household order. So the word oikos, nomos, those are the two Greek words that are the root words for the English word economy. Oikos means house, and nomos means law or management. So an economy is the law of the house, or the management of a household. And why would you even manage it? Again, today people they think in terms of, well, I made my bed this morning and I washed dishes after I ate my Cheerios or whatever. But in the pre-modern world, it also meant creating goods for the market. So maybe a man was a blacksmith, and his entire family would be engaged in the work that he was performing. So his sons would be his helpers. His wife would be, the person who was taking care of the books, making sure that, the accounts were paid, the bills were going out, that the raw materials were being purchased, and then at the dinner table, at the end of the day, they would talk about a lot of things, but they would also talk about the business, the family concern. So in light of that, when Scripture says, obey your father and mother to children, it's not just saying, well, cater to their whims. When he wants to watch football, let him. It's actually directly related to the welfare of the kids in question. So if like a kid's, a farm boy, and his father says to him, go out into the back 40 and bring in the cows. We got a hurricane coming or something like that. And if the son says, no, I want to head out with my friends, well, it is going to feel the effects of the household's economic hardship if there are a bunch of cows that die. It's not just, oh, that's dad's thing. This is our thing. And the father is overseeing the work of the household. So, and this is also one of the reasons why implicit that a father is got to be the one, because oftentimes, there needs to be a little physical reinforcement of the rules of the house. Just like in a well-governed city, you need to have people who are in a position to actually apply force in those regrettable instances in which people are breaking the law. A
lot of people in our day don't even get that.
Yeah. And there's obviously, a protocol. First of all, you say, hello, my name is Officer so-and-so. Did you realize that you just put a candy bar in your pocket? Put it back. And that things can escalate, but you don't necessarily go right for your gun and shoot the kid who's put the candy bar in his pocket.
Not.
And in the same thing in a household, right? Yeah. Or in the same thing in a household, you don't, initially just cut a kid off from his inheritance and kick him out because of disobedience. But the point is that you do need to enforce these rules, particularly in light of the reality that we all depend on each other to do, each person do his part in order to have a livelihood, to make a living. So because the household has been reduced to essentially a recreational institution, we have a hard time understanding why, parental authority is really indispensable. Now, when it comes to the larger picture of, what does the household reflect in the biggest sense? Well, the household reflects the household of God. And in that household, there is a groom and a bride, right? I mean, Christ and the church. So the relationship between a husband and wife is intended to illustrate or reflect this larger relationship. So a lot of folks, when they think about the Apostle Paul and his references to the Lord and the church and groom and bride, they think, well, this was just human creativity. Just sort of he just kind of projected this idea into the sky. He's just dealing with sort of the situation on the ground, and he's imaginatively applying it to Christ and the church. Well, the traditional Christian understanding is just the reverse. The projecting is coming from above. So God is the creator, and he created households, fathers, mothers, husbands, wives, with the full intent seeing in that microcosm a little picture of the macrocosm.
Hmm.
So that's why it's indispensable. That's why we can never, as Christians, endorse or accept the blasphemous notion that there is such a thing as gay marriage. It's just not true. You've got a couple of people living together and doing perverse things, and it's just not the same. It's not. So you see those little equal signs on the back of people's on their bumpers and stuff. That's not equal. There is now equality there.
Yeah, absolutely. What happens when there are no fathers? What happens when there is no patriarchy? And my answer, because of where I live, my answer is, well, Baltimore happens.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
If you want to see matriarchy on steroids, go into a lot of urban settings, but increasingly in other places, increasingly in certain parts of rural America that have kind of lost their economic livelihood basis. So you go to some places where there's just opioid kind of stuff all over the place. You have the same kinds of, inner city, social chaos that now you have in these other settings. So yeah, I think that's right. I think when women are married to the state, which is effectively what we see.
Yes, we created that.
They rely upon the state for all the things that in a healthy environment they rely on their husbands for. Then you end up with a lot of craziness because the state is a very bad father.
You're probably familiar with Anthony Esselin's book, No Apologies. I imagine you've probably read that.
Well, I've not read it, but Tony's a friend of mine, so he and I have talked a lot. Yeah,
sweet man. We were on vacation at the Outer Banks of North Carolina recently. All kids, grandkids were all in one great big, ginormous, ridiculously expensive house. We all split the bill, Right. And I sneaked it down there, and I'm an early guy, so I'm up for hours before anybody else is stirring. And I read that book that week. And man, I loved it. And one of the things in that book is when you have no fathers, young men become one of two things. Either they become dangerous or they become passive and lazy.
Yep.
Yeah, we see both of those. Any comments you want to make on that?
Oh, yeah. Well, I was a ward of the state. And what I tell people is when you don't have a father or a house to live in that's healthy and the state takes over, it's like being raised by the DMV. It's basically this, sort of sterile, officious, impersonal environment. Pardon me. And if you want to have a world full of violent men and sociopaths and passive guys, just let the state run everything.
No doubt.
And the good thing is many people in government know this. The problem is that I'm sorry, I've got this frog in my throat. The problem is we live in a society where people are trying to evade responsibility, and when you have that happen, you really do end up with this void that gets filled by the state. So yes, there are megalomaniacs in politics who are trying to make the state into everything. That's true. But you also have just the failure of people to do their jobs. And this creates an environment within, that can be filled by the crazies. Make all of the promises that everything will be just fine if we just let them run everything.
Yeah. Hey, so I saw online that you gave a talk at the University of Idaho, and your talk was called Toxic Matriarchy. I believe they handed you the title. And from what I've seen, there was a pretty raucous crowd going on there. You had a lot of fun, didn't you? So what was that about? What is toxic matriarchy? How would you define that? What's the danger of it, and so on?
Yeah, one of the things that was fun about that talk is that they thought I was going to talk about one thing, but I was actually talking about something else, and that was that was intentional. I intended to surprise them, and it actually played out exactly the way I thought it would. So
I did watch it, by the way. Really enjoyed it.
Oh, great. Well, they thought I was going to attack women. And that the whole thing was going to be this thing where I was trying to belittle, females and stuff like that. And it was pretty
Little
obvious
did
that
they know you, huh?
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I like women. I'm actually married to one.
Yeah, got some granddaughters and all that.
Right. I think women are great. But what I was addressing was this very thing where you have a world in which people are being catered to and permitted to sort of indulge themselves in immature ways, and instead of calling for young people, in particular, to rise to the occasion and pursue excellence and live up to high standards, we lower standards. We have a kind of permissive approach to things, and nurture is the only thing that we celebrate. And if there's a failure by someone to live up to a standard, rather than reprimand that person or call that person to live more, I think productively, we essentially lower the standard to help them feel good. It's sort of like what you see with everyone gets a trophy.
Yes,
that kind of thing. Yeah, and we see it all over the place. We see it in academia. I mean, the whole safe spaces stuff. The emphasis on no one should ever feel bad because they heard something they disagreed with or made them feel inadequate or what have you. That is the ethos that I was addressing. So that's the toxic matriarchy, and it's.
Are you saying that's toxic matriarchy because we do know that women are fueled more to, they are therefore inclined more to nurturing. Men, by contrast, are fueled more to, or more inclined toward being assertive and aggressive. And so is it toxic matriarchy because nurturing rules now? Nurturing is the thing.
Yeah, and that's not to imply that we don't need nurturing.
Right.
We do. Even adults need
nurturing. Yeah.
Even adults need nurturing. So, like if you get really hurt, you need somebody to take you in and take care of you, that kind of thing. So, nurture is not the enemy. The problem is that we've lost the other thing, and it kind of gets back to what I suspect this gal from Calvin is talking about with Jesus and John Wayne. She doesn't really have a place for authority. It sounds like, again, maybe I'm not, describing what she's up to fairly, but what I see beyond just the title of that book, even in the Christian world, is that we feel very awkward about standards and calling people to live up to good standards, high standards, or biblical standards for that matter.
These are our time. Just incidentally, that kind of reminds me. So I was a Dr. Benjamin Spock baby.
Okay.
Yeah. So, my parents, they didn't know. Now they have two kids, my older sister and me. How do we raise these kids? And I don't know how or when or where they came across Dr. Benjamin Spock. Yeah. And I can remember the volume. It was that big, and the copy we had was pink, and it sat in the dry sink in our main living room. And they consulted Dr. Spock, which I don't know why he needed that many pages, because it basically just said, let them do whatever they want to do. And I was sort of raised that way. But so it was probably toxic matriarchy in my home.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing about
if I got in trouble with school, oh man, she would go give them the business.
And the thing that we see is that men can be guilty of toxic matriarchy as well when they behave in ways that don't work to their strengths. So, you see, I call these guys mommy second class. It's like, Heather has two mommies, and one of them is his father or her father, and it's because, what they really don't reflect upon what it means to be a man and what are the gifts that God has given to me to bring to the household. And mainly it's because they've bought the libel. That's what it is. It's libel. Fathers have been libeled. If we were to take, Hitler and Stalin and say, that's what it means to be a ruler. And that's the only thing that we have to work with is that. Then everybody would say, well, then rulers are evil.
We don't want that.
Yeah. But those aren't the only rulers. We can point to other rulers who were just and say, well, that's really what it means to be a ruler.
Or if you take the average father in a sitcom or something, they've just been belittled and belittled. They've been, incapable, fumbling people, and show after show after show. So we don't want to be that.
Yeah, and I think there's actually a larger agenda, both economic and spiritual, that's being pursued through those sitcoms.
What would that be? Go ahead.
Well, I think, the spiritual, of course, is pretty obvious. We know, for example, that fathers have a very strong influence on the religious outlook of their children. Their studies have demonstrated that when a father is overseeing the religious education of his children, the likelihood of those children growing into a reflection of their father in terms of their faith, whether we're talking about Christianity, Judaism, whatever, is very high. That doesn't mean that a mother doesn't have an important role, but we just know based on the data that fathers really do rule, whether they know it or not, whether they practice that rule well or not. And I can go into some thoughts on why that's so, but also I think that there's an economic agenda and even a political agenda. Fathers are the boundary keepers of the household. And if you want to get at kids, you got to get dad out of the way. So there are different ways to do that. You can undermine his confidence. You can undermine his image in the eyes of his children. You can just get him out of the house.
Yes, like government be dad.
Yeah. So there are different things that can be done to accomplish it. And like I said, there are economic reasons. There are people who, don't want dad to kind of rule the roost, because if he does, there are certain implications for certain economic activities, meaning that you're not going to make as much money maybe selling porn or selling video games or that kind of stuff, because dad's going to put some limits on some things. That kind of, and also you want to get at mom. You actually want mom out of the house. You want her working for you, not with him. And you can package that as women's liberation and self-determination and all that kind of stuff.
So let's transition to kids. We haven't talked a lot directly about kids. So kids, like globally, nobody wants them anymore, but nations are realizing, we need kids, or we're in trouble here, because we need kids who are going to be the producers and the consumers. So interesting story on that front. So we support a church in Aschaffensburg, Germany. It's near Frankfurt. And talking to the pastor friend there, his name is Dominic, great guy. He wrote me about a year ago and said, hey, we just had our second baby. And because of that, his wife gets to be off work for a year, and the government pays her salary, and her job is secure. It'll be waiting for her. And Dominic gets off for a year, and the government pays his salary, and his job is waiting for him when he goes back. And this is the second time they've done that, because it's their second child. And I thought, what on earth is Germany? Oh, I know. They need them to have some kids. They're doing everything they can to encourage that. So you probably know the replacement rate is 2.1, and I believe in the USA we're at 1.7, not even replacing ourselves. By the way, interesting, we could talk about this, but let's not. Immigration is helping us, right? Because people from our South are coming up and they want to work. They want to be producers. They want to be consumers. They're young. They're 18 to 35 or something. So that's really helping us, but that's a topic for another day. Why should families have more than 1.7 children?
Yeah. Well, Kevin DeYoung just wrote a really great piece for First Things magazine on that very thing. And I can't recall the name of the article, but it was basically in defense of having children.
And he's done it. So what do they have, like 6 or 7 kids?
I think it's 9, believe it.
Is it 9?
Yeah.
Man, what kind of a van do you have to buy to haul 9 kids?
Well, he talks a little bit about that in the article. And but the observations you made are right. Now, one of the things I think it's worth noting is that even with all those incentives, Germany can't even get to 1.7.
Yeah. And other nations the same. Like they're begging their people, have babies, and they're not doing it. In Asian countries, because so many of them are in cities in teeny little apartments, and it's like, have another kid? Where would I put another kid? And they're just not doing it.
Well, that's another important thing. There's another guy named Peter Zahan.
I've read his books.
Okay. So
I'm working off of him. Good guy.
Yeah. And Zahan notes that if you want to bring the population down or fertility rate down, encourage people to live in apartments, because that's like the very powerful sterilizing force.
Kibosh on it, doesn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
So, there are a lot of things that are conflicting in our society in terms of the messages that our society is sending to people. There are some people that are really happy that population is in decline, particularly people kind of in the ecological sort of extreme, the green people, and people on the far extreme of that. So I think that there are a range of people who have, sort of ecological concerns, and some of them I think we could even work with, but some of them are just, I think that they're misanthropes. I mean, they hate the human race.
They do. Don't they? They want to get us down to what, 1 or 2 billion?
Yeah, or maybe even not even be around at all.
And like no farming and no fossil fuels, and we're all just out foraging for nuts or something. I don't know what we're going to be doing, but it's kind of like that. But how would you encourage Christian families, evangelical, solid Christian families, to have more kids?
Well, I think the thing to point those folks to is Scripture, of course, and the be fruitful and multiply command has not been abrogated.
Still stands, doesn't it?
That's
Last time I looked.
That's right. That's right. And what is the Lord looking for? Well, he's looking for his image. The Lord delights in seeing his image multiply, right? Now, so we're made in the image of God. Now, of course, because of sin, that image is tarnished. It's twisted. But the gospel is intended to restore it. That's one of the effects. So it's especially incumbent upon Christians who are both embodied creatures made in God's image and commanded to multiply, and people who know the gospel, which addresses the sin problem, to have kids and to raise them in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. Now, does that mean all of your kids are going to, stay true to Christ? Well, I mean, we have evidence in Scripture that that's not the case, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try.
Yes.
Right. And so I think that that's the main thing. We want to glorify God, and one of the principal ways that God is glorified is through people, and you got to have them if that's going to happen. Yes. So I think that this is something that we just can't lose sight of, that we need to encourage people to bring children into the world and raise them in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord, because it glorifies God.
So do you think some of this is working? I guess we probably both think some of this is working. So you were talking earlier about how what the family used to be, and it was like a production center, and everybody was contributing and everybody was involved. So like the more kids, the better for the family business, right? And it's not that anymore at all, is it? Now they're an expense, especially if you're going to send them to the university. And you probably shouldn't send them to just any university anymore, but you're going to send them to the university, and that's going to cost you $100,000 or whatever. And so they're a big expense. So Christian families are like, man, I can't afford more kids. Interesting, though, recently, I don't know if you saw this. I happen to follow Elon Musk on Twitter because it's interesting to see what you do. All right. Yeah. And remember about maybe 6 or 8 months ago, my memory's bad for the past, he tweeted something about people need to have more children. Yeah. And he finds that the richer people get, the fewer children they have. And he mentions all of his super wealthy friends have no kids. Right. Or maybe if anybody has a kid, it's one kid. So he's saying it's really not an economic thing here. It's not like if we had more money, we'd have more kids. You just don't want more kids. Comments?
No, I think he's absolutely right. The evidence, empirical evidence, is undeniable. Where you have affluence, you have fewer kids. Mm-hmm. And where you see people who are just kind of getting by, you got more kids. So the excuse that people make that we can't afford kids is just not the case. I mean, you can't. Well, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish and what you're thinking
what
about.
we can't afford. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I remember the USDA of all people. They actually came out with a report, I think back in 2017, about how much it cost to raise a kid. I think it came over like $270,000 a kid, some goofy number like that. You just wonder what were they, what were they thinking? Yeah. But I also think that what we see in our society today is our society has sent mixed signals. So on the one hand, the economy really needs us to have kids. So, say large corporations, they really need us to have kids because, as you noted earlier, they need consumers. Yep. They also need employees.
People to hire. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But what do? They separate husbands and wives. They give women a lot of incentives to not have kids. In fact, now it's like a benefit to get an abortion. If you find yourself, if you're a woman and you find yourself in a state that has outlawed abortion or something like that, we'll fly you to a place.
Send you to California.
Yeah. So there's this goofy set of mixed messages. These people don't, apparently they don't either make the connections in their heads or they don't actually talk to each other in the conference room. So there's all of that. And what our society has done is it's managed to move the asset from the household to the business. So, governments and businesses need people, and households no longer believe that's the case for themselves, because now households see children as liabilities, but businesses and governments still see them as assets. So what's happened? We've moved the asset from the ledger for the household into the ledger of the corporation and the company. And as a result, people are having fewer kids. But as you noted earlier, in the past, children were seen as wealth. So Jacob was a wealthy man because he had 12 sons, not in spite of the fact that he had 12 sons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, all right, I'm going to draw this to a close soon, but I have one, maybe two more things I want to ask you about. This next one, I know your answer to it. But I want everybody listening to this podcast to hear your answer to it. I love your answer to this. So talk about, why do you not allow couples to write their own custom wedding vows?
Yeah. Usually when I get the sense that that's something they're interested in, I tell them the Unitarians are down the street. If you want to get married by them, go for it.
They'll let you write anything, won't they?
That's right. Yeah, you can marry a tree, marry your dog, whatever. So I think that the main thing is that marriage is not something that this particular couple invented. This is something that they're entering into that existed before they were born. It has its justification and purpose in God's order of things. And furthermore, when people custom do their vows, it's all about them. Yes. And everybody's called to be a witness. So I'm supposed to sit here and listen to you, wax grandiloquent about how you'll,
or not so eloquent.
That's right, just goofy, and what people receive from that is the impression that their marriage is all about them, and it has nothing to do with the people who are there to witness it. Whereas when we have common vows, you're reminded of your own vows every time you attend a wedding. You say, "Oh, I did promise that, didn't I?" And then we can actually hold them accountable because we have a common set of vows. We say, "Well, I know what you promised to do because it's the exact same thing I promised to do. So you don't have a right to just kind of, jump on a plane and go to California and find yourself. You made some promises. Is this new self that you're looking for a liar? Yes. Unfaithful, unwilling to do his or her duty? Well, then you're a slime ball." And just put it that plainly. But you don't understand. Yeah, right. Okay. I know it. I think I do understand.
So I think it's also awesome to know that, like if you're the young getting married couple, You love it that your great great grandma's diamond ring got passed down, and you got to put that on your girlfriend's finger. One of our guys sitting right over there. This just happened.
Right.
He just put a grandma's ring on his girl's finger. They're engaged now, and we love that because this was grandma's, and it's getting passed down to us. Wouldn't it be wonderful? We had the same thing. These were grandma's vows because they came from the church. They're the same. We're doing the
what
same
grandma
thing.
did. Yeah. So. What grandma did and what you're doing are the same thing.
I think there's some power in that.
Oh, yeah.
Letting couples write their own vows is a little bit close to giving them the idea that, you can make your marriage be whatever you want it to be. You can rewrite marriage. Like we're trying to rewrite gender and everything. You can rewrite marriage. We're trying to rewrite the family. You can make your family be whatever. No, actually, the church is going to tell you what your marriage is and what your family is going to be.
Yeah, there are so many goofy things going on right now, but they don't work. And there's this strange notion that we can kind of create the world from scratch in every generation, as though no one has ever learned from experience by doing stupid things in the past. Yeah. I sometimes I think about this. I think about you've probably experienced this where you got this family that's just a mess, and the oldest son does stupid stuff and goes to jail. And then the second son does stupid stuff and goes to jail. And then the third son does stupid stuff and goes to jail. And you say, can't you learn anything by watching somebody else do stupid stuff? Or do you have to do it all yourself too?
Yeah, like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. We will go one more question. Here it is. We're right at home stretch. So if the people listening to this podcast could change one thing about how they view the family, what would you want them to change?
Well, I would want them to change, we've been talking about this for a while now. I want them to change the notion that it's all about them and that they get to invent, what a household is and what it means. You are receiving the riches of the biblical patrimony that's been passed down to you over thousands of years. This is rich stuff. If you can't see the value in it, it's not because it doesn't have value. It's because you have no eye for value. That's the thing. We, in our individualist, sort of subjectivist world, the idea that value is simply something that is determined by the desires of people at any given moment is just stupid. We've all made bad decisions based on fluctuating desires in the past. And then as we've grown older, we've said, how could I have been so stupid
Yes.
to think that was important or that was valuable? I know better now. Well, what we have handed down to us is not just the wisdom of an individual over the course of his life, but the wisdom that's been handed down to us over the generations. That's
the ages.
Yeah, accumulated wisdom of the human race, for goodness sake.
Yeah. You just want to throw all that out and say, "Oh, we'll design it the way we." Do you think it's going to work?
That's right. That's right. Are you some creature from another planet? You don't have anything in common with the rest of us.
Really? Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah.
Hope you have good weather out there in the Northwest.
Well, we're just entering the rainy season. Tomorrow, the rainy season begins. We've got 2 seasons.
Literally, you all have a day. Like that's the day the rainy season begins.
Well, you can tell by when you look at your weather forecast, and like you go from like every day is sun to every day is rain. And tomorrow the rain begins and it doesn't stop for as far as you can see.
Wow, that's crazy. You must be hardy people up there.
Well, we drink a lot of coffee.
Sounds good. Thanks again for joining me today. And thanks for you listeners joining us today. This is Grounded. And I just want to remind you that it comes out twice a month. You can find it on all the regular platforms. Thank you for joining us. Hope we'll see you again.